There's no doubt that the 7-time world champion has cemented his place in Formula One forever. Yep, we're talking about Michael Schumacher. And while his achievements, records, and fan base were enough to mark his name as a legend, his influence on Formula One drivers and the grid is undeniable. And one such driver happened to open up about Schumacher's influence on his life. Curious? Keep watching to find out more deets. First up, Daniel Ricciardo takes a trip down nostalgia lane. It turns out that right about his second season in Formula One, Schumacher and Ricciardo had a private chat that ended up being one of the formative memories of the Australian as an F1 driver. Now, we can't forget the skiing accident, after which the German legend has taken on some sort of mythical quality in the sport. Needless to say, he was a fierce competitor. In fact, he's known for all the mind games he played with his teammates, especially when he locked former world champion Nico Rosberg out of a toilet literally minutes before qualifying. Having said that, Schumacher, one of the greatest drivers in the history of Formula One, is sitting side by side with Lewis Hamilton on a record of 7 world championships. As for Ricciardo, he shared a great memory with the F1 driver, revealing the words of encouragement that helped him settle well into Formula One. And as his career comes to a turning point, he's taking us down on a nostalgic trip. Not too long ago, he spoke to Speed Cafe and revealed that one of the favorite drives of his career was back when he finished 10th at Suzuka in 2012. At the time, it was also his 4th points finish in Formula One, but that's not the important part. Instead, the way it happened was a meaningful bit for the Australian. Following up, here's why it was a memorable race for Ricciardo. As he explained, he held off Schumacher for the last 17 laps to hang on to the points finish. And let's not forget how intimidated he was by the 7-time world champion at the time. In his words, obviously, I was like, he's God. In fact, he even said that if there was live betting, he never would have bet on himself that he was going to keep the legend behind for the next 10 laps or so. And the fact that he still managed to do it anyway, and the level of comfort he felt defending the champion, was pretty surprising for the young Australian. If anything, it boosted his confidence in his racecraft. As for Schumacher, 2012 was the last year of his career driving for Mercedes. He ended up claiming one more podium and finished the championship in 13th. On the other hand, it was Ricciardo's first of his 2 seasons at Toro Rosso, which you now know as AlphaTauri, right before he jumped to the top team at Red Bull. Overall, it was still his 2nd season in Formula One. So, with Ricciardo starting out and Schumacher at the end of his incredible career, a few words of respect from the Honey Badger from the 7-time world champion completely changed his F1 trajectory. Coming up is the private chat that changed Ricciardo's career. It was overall a pretty important race for the Australian, one where he grew a lot of confidence, and yet it's not talked about. Mostly because he finished in 10th place. And the race ended with Schumacher congratulating him on the driver's parade, saying good job last week defending. A few words of respect were nothing less than an achievement for Ricciardo considering the point of his career. And maybe the German didn't even realize the impact of his words at the time, but he definitely changed Ricciardo's energy and confidence that day. From then on, the Honey Badger went on to have 2 third-place championship finishes in the 5 seasons he raced with Red Bull, along with 7 race wins and 30 podiums. Clearly, he built a reputation for his late braking and incredible defense. Having said that, his move to Renault and then to McLaren in the next few seasons only managed to add 1 win and 2 podiums to his career. Needless to say, ever since his McLaren contract ended a year earlier than expected, it left his career at a crossroads. Not to mention, Ricciardo almost took a year off from Formula One. Right after the McLaren axe, he didn't have a whole lot of competitive options waiting for him. In fact, he even turned down race seats at Williams and Haas, simply because he didn't want to go to the back of the grid, even if the alternative was a sabbatical. If anything, Ricciardo felt that he needed the time off to refocus and rebuild if he wanted to make an epic comeback in 2024. And right when fans were almost sure that sabbatical was the way to go for the Honey Badger, Mercedes came in with a reserve driver role. Rumor has it the team implied that since Lewis Hamilton's contract was ending by the end of 2023 anyway, the Australian could perhaps replace him after a year as a reserve driver. But as soon as this made headlines, the 7-time champion confirmed that he's not going anywhere anytime soon. On top of that, Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff is in talks with Hamilton over a multi-year contract as the duo set their eyes on a record-breaking 8th championship. Having said that, next season, you're going to see Ricciardo as the reserve driver for Red Bull right after his worst F1 season ever since 2013. And while the door isn't completely closed for him, he was accused of having cashed in in his exit from Red Bull back in 2018. In fact, McLaren team boss Zak Brown didn't close the door on the F1 driver either, saying he'd love to have him back on the team someday. At the same time, he also mentioned that while Daniel gave it everything he's got, the outcome was definitely disappointing. Moving on, here's how Schumacher changed Formula One forever. Let's just say the German legend definitely broke the mold when we're talking about what it means to be a Formula One driver, with incredible levels of fitness and attention to detail that we've never seen before. Along with his win-at-all-cost competitive spirit, he's someone Formula One can never forget. Having said that, it's difficult to digest that he's no longer behind the wheel, or even able to come forward and talk about his legacy. Back at the 1991 Belgian Grand Prix, Schumacher made his Formula One debut, and just about a year later, he was already a race winner. Another 3 years went by, and he was the world champion. And over the next 2 decades, he was more influential than any other driver in the history of Formula One. Records were broken. Team orders were 2 words he hated. And as for Ferrari, well, it was once again the team to beat. In fact, did you know that they literally tried to change the rules to slow him down? Clearly that didn't work, because even after he retired, his influence is still pretty visible up and down the pit lane. Coming up, let's go back to the 90s. Back in 1995, one mighty Ferrari wasn't able to keep up with other top teams like Williams, McLaren, and Benetton. But it wasn't long until Michael Schumacher stepped in and proved to be the catalyst for their revival back in 1996. In fact, we've seen some incredible displays in the mediocre F310 by Schumacher, where he literally secured 3rd place in the standings in his debut year. If we're being honest, the car was at least a million miles away from the all-conquering Williams FW18, but that didn't stop the German driver. Having said that, there were a few lows too, especially when he got disqualified in 1997 for his clash with Jacques Villeneuve, and in 1999 when a broken leg cost him his championship. But soon enough, everything fell into place. He went on to win 57 of the 85 races between 2000 and 2004 with Ferrari, while grabbing 5 consecutive championships. Clearly, it was the longest spell of single-team dominance in the history of Formula One. About another 2 years later, in 2006, the legend retired for the first time. And ever since then, Ferrari has continued to pump out title-challenging cars on 4 occasions. Needless to say, it's the team everyone wants to drive for. What's more, Schumacher changed the way drivers approached fitness. About 20 years ago, it was pretty common to see drivers coming out of their cockpit after challenging races, dripping with sweat and absolutely exhausted. As for Schumacher, the young German would effortlessly hop out of his car and remove his helmet, looking absolutely fresh every single time. Now, let's not forget that driving an F1 car is much harder than you think. The G-forces created by braking, accelerating, and cornering can take a heavy toll on drivers. And don't even get us started on the high temperatures along with the alertness they need to win the race. Back in the 90s, fitness training was already a part of every driver's life, but only a few took it to the next level. And while being tired after a race was totally normal in Formula One, Michael was a driver who simply did not get tired. And since everyone now had a super talented rival who could drive a whole race at qualifying intensity without a drop of sweat or any exhaustion, they had no choice but to adapt. And today, drivers have fitness levels equal to professional football and basketball players. In fact, teams have armies of personal trainers, nutritionists, and whatnot. On top of that, the off-season is mostly an intense regime of strength and endurance training, all thanks to Schumacher. Finally, Schumacher will never be forgotten. Anyone who's heard about Formula One knows about the legend. In fact, he's got an unbeatable record of 7 world championships that still stands alongside Lewis Hamilton, a man who literally rewrote the record books and changed the trajectory of Ferrari. Throughout his career is a man Formula One can never forget. If anything, legends like him continue to inspire F1 drivers who are racing on the grid, eyeing record-breaking titles. If anything, Ricciardo is simply one of many who still look up to him. That's a wrap for this video. What's your take on Michael Schumacher's influence on Daniel Ricciardo and Formula One? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.